for this international webinar entitled Innovative Learning Strategy During COVID-19. I will briefly introduce you to the speakers. The first one, we have Dr. Philip A. Tondrau. He is a senior lecturer at National Institute of Education, Nanyang Technology University of Singapore. The second one, we have Bernadette Bugtong. She is a teacher at Benguet National High School of Philippines. The third, we have Dato Dr. Amin Senin, the ex-Director General of Education of Malaysia and the Chairman of Early Education Cluster. And the last, but of course not least, Imanul Mutakin, SPDI. He is the headmaster of Umusabri Junior High School.
Yes, good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Can you hear me, participants?
Okay, please.
Okay, let me try sharing my screen here. Can you see it?
Yes.
Please wait. Okay. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So again, good afternoon to everyone. As mentioned, I'm from the Philippines. I'm a teacher at a government educational institution at Benguet National High School. So I was asked to share to you some of the learning and teaching strategies that we have been using and that we plan to use for the next school year here in the Philippines. So let me just give you the divisions or the parts of my presentations before we're going to start. So the first one, I'm just going to give you a brief introduction or description of the COVID-19 experience in my country. And then the second part would be on our plans for the next school year, which will start on August 24 next month. And then the third part would be some of the strategies or some of the things that we have been doing in my school, Benguet National High School. So let me start with the first one. Okay, so let me just show you a very short timeline of the pandemic experience here in the Philippines. So January 30, we recorded the first COVID case in my country because a Chinese woman traveled from China to the Philippines. And then March 10, local government units already started suspending classes. So our school year starts from June and then ends at March. But the government decided to suspend classes during the second week of March and encourage everyone to work from home. March 15, it escalated very quickly. The entirety of Metro Manila was declared under quarantine because of the rising number of cases. And right after 2 days, the entire area of Luzon was also put under quarantine. So when we say quarantine here in the Philippines, what happens is that students were not allowed to go out from their houses, teachers were not allowed to go to school, workers were encouraged, highly encouraged to work at home. So a lot of people lost their employment. So what would be the effect of this to our educational system? As a school, we have to consider the employment of the parents of our students. Will they be able to provide for the materials of our students? Will they be able to let their children enroll in private institutions? So these are a lot of considerations. Up until now, we are still under quarantine. Okay, so from March until now, which is already July, we are still on quarantine. A lot of areas in the Philippines are still on quarantine. So which means people, oh, someone is speaking.
Sorry, someone is speaking. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay now.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Please
Maybe
go
she
ahead.
has a question.
Yeah. Maybe she already
Okay.
has a question, but anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So as mentioned, we are still on quarantine because of the number of deaths that we have recorded. So comparing our data from the data of countries like Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, we're already at almost 2,000 deaths because of the COVID-19. So if we compare it with your data, I think our number is way higher than yours. Okay. So these are considerations that we have to think of before trying to formulate a strategy for the next school year. Okay. So on the next slide, we see here some pictures during the graduation. These are some of the strategies that various schools in the Philippines have employed in order for them to let their students experience graduation, even if we are still under quarantine. So, number one is the first picture shows you what they refer to as the robot graduation, where you have a robot, and then the face of the robot would be the student's face. I think this was also used in other countries. And then the second picture, this was employed by one school. They refer to this one as the drive-through graduation, in which the students are not going to march to the stage. It would be their cars. They're going to drive their cars going to the stage in order for them to feel like they're graduating. Okay, so these are just some of the innovative strategies of these schools in letting their students experience graduation. Okay, so now let's go to the more important part of my presentation. What then would be our plans for the next school year? Since from March until July, we were not allowed to go to school. Classes were all suspended. Okay, let me just show to you this statement from the Secretary of Education, the Department of Education. This pretty much summarizes everything that we plan for the next school year. Let me just read. She said, there will be no face to face classes and sessions until we are assured of the safety of our children and our teachers. However, we also believe, Mr. President, because this was mentioned to the President, that we can provide learning opportunities to our students without necessarily requiring them to go to school. And this we can do through what is described as blended and distant learning. So, it's very difficult to start face-to-face classes in the Philippines because, as I have mentioned, there are still a lot of infected Filipinos from the COVID-19 virus. So what the plan of the government, or the plan specifically of the Department of Education, is to still give learning opportunities, to the students despite the protocols or the guidelines from the other government agencies. So, what did she mean when she said blended and distant learning? That is what I'm going to share to you today. Okay. Are you still with me?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yes.
so the first modality would be distance learning modality. I think you're also using this one in your own schools. We have three types. Number one is the modular distance learning. Number two is the online distance learning. And number three is the TV or radio based education distance learning. For number one, modular distance learning, teachers have already written their self learning modules, which are going to be distributed to our students before the start or every week during the school year. Okay? And for students who are auditory learners, these modules were also translated into video modules. Okay. And for the second one, online distance learning, this is also being done by schools already, specifically private schools. They are also using online platforms for their interactions with their students. And the third one, probably that is a bit unique in the case of the Philippines, would be TV and radio based education, where we are going to broadcast programs in TV channels and radio channels for students to watch and listen to. Okay. The second one is blended learning, or what others refer to as hybrid learning. Blended learning because it would be a combination of at least two of the other modalities in delivering lessons. Letter A, combination, would be the combination of online distance learning and modular learning. So aside from giving modules to our students, we are also going to meet them in online platforms, okay, for their other subjects. And for the second one, for the second blended learning modality, we have a combination of modules and also radio and television based learning. For students who do not have internet connection at home, who do not have laptops, letter B combination is highly recommended. But if the student has no laptop, if the student has no internet connection, if the student has no radio, no television, then the option would be pure modular learning. The student is going to be given materials to read and answer at home. And of course, the third one is homeschooling. Homeschooling is legal in the Philippines, but it's not very common. It's not popular to parents, especially that a lot of parents are working, so they don't have time really to do homeschooling. So these are some of the learning delivery modalities that we plan to employ during the next school year. So the students, the parents can decide whether to do blended learning, but if they don't have the resources, they can also opt to have only modular learning modality. Okay. So we are adjusting based on the needs and the resources of the students. Okay. If there are some questions, please just comment on that chat section.
Oh yes, the
Yeah.
discussion part actually at the end of this section. So the
Okay.
first
Okay.
is I let all the speakers to give their presentation, and all the student who has any question, you can just text in a chat section. We'll collect
Okay.
all the
Okay.
question and will be discussed at the end of after all the speakers already present their presentation. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Uh,
Thank you.
uh,
Okay.
okay, you're
Anyway,
welcome.
this is the last
That
part of.
was a very interesting presentation from Mrs. Bernadette.
Can
And
I have the last part, please?
oh, okay, sorry,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Mrs.
Sorry. Sorry.
Bugtong. I'm
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
sorry.
Because this
Yeah.
is, I think, important also. Okay.
Okay,
To
sorry. I'm
share
really
to
sorry.
to
It's
share the
yeah.
uh, work or output of my colleagues in my school. Okay. So
Okay.
anyway, in my school, we also
Mm.
have done some things to prepare for the next school year. In the first or the next slide that you see here, you have here people working. These are not laborers, these are not workers. They're actually teachers, but they have volunteered their time to go to school and construct washing areas for the students, for the visitors, for the parents, and for the other teachers to use when we're going to start the delivery of lessons on August. Okay? And for the next slide, we see here also how teachers are dedicated in contacting their students, asking them if they want to enroll. Because let us admit it, in the Philippines, majority of the students do not have internet connection. So we cannot just send them a link and then register or enroll through that link. So a lot of them are going to be texted, called, or even visited in their homes just for us to be informed if they want to enroll or not. Okay. The next set of pictures would be this one. A lot of students or parents lost their jobs during the pandemic, so they don't have money to buy materials. So what happened was that the community was very responsive to our calls for donation. A lot of people from the community donated materials to our school to be used by the parents and the students. In the last picture, you can even see here a teacher who is selling baked goods just to earn money in order for her to buy materials for her students, because she knows the plight of these students. So these are very commendable efforts from various individuals. And of course, we also conduct trainings in order to prepare ourselves for the next school year. Now, my point for showing all of these pictures to you, I'm sorry if I'm taking a very long time for this presentation. This is the last one. My
Okay.
point for sharing these pictures to you is that, you know, we know that we lack resources. However, definitely we do not lack resourcefulness. Okay. We don't have money to buy for materials. Well, we do things, activities, income generating projects so that we can help our students. We are not technologically capacitated for the next school years. Well, we ask our co-teachers who are very highly technologically capacitated to teach us. I think that is the only best strategy that I can share with you now. Now, to end my presentation, maybe Sir Tondo is okay already. So it says here, the African proverb states, it takes a village to raise a child, which is very relevant in this time of the pandemic. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for Mrs. Bugtong. That was a very
I'm sorry, Miss.
okay, Miss Bugtong. Miss
Yeah,
Bugtong.
yeah.
That was a very